Do you know just how important diet is in helping us stay healthy and feeling energetic during menopause? Generally, staying well from nutrition, movement, sleep, supplements is hard. We don't pay as much attention to it as we should because we're deep into our careers or raising a family, oftentimes both. My guest on today's show has achieved incredible recognition throughout her career in nutrition and continues to make an impact helping women live healthier lives. Certified nutritionist and consultant, author, podcast host, presenter, and more, Jackie Lynch joins me today. And we've got a lot to talk about, from weight gain and menopause to well-being in the workplace, especially during midlife, and how her award-winning Menopause Nutrition Clinic continues to support busy women who want personalised nutrition advice. As a fellow of the Institute for Optimum Nutrition and nutrition consultant, Jackie has done a lot to impact the lives of women during menopause. I'm so excited and honoured to talk with her today. Welcome, Jackie, to Unpause the Menopause podcast. We're absolutely delighted to have you today, and we're looking to dive right into the depths of well-being, both at home and at work, as well as diet for menopause and potential menopause weight gain too. And I'm sure that you're going to share us with your knowledge, tips and hacks to feeling great through midlife and beyond. It's really lovely to meet you, Jackie. Thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be so much fun. Now, before we get stuck in, I always ask our guests, what is your morning routine? What does it look like? How do you set yourself up for the day?
Oh, well, the first thing I do is 10 minutes of yoga. And it's a great way to just sort of stretch the body, get things moving, and it's not too scary. So I just get my mat out, do a few yoga moves, changes every day. I've been doing yoga for years, so I just sort of make up something as I go along, depending on how I'm feeling on any given morning. But it's a really great way of not eating too much into your day, so not thinking, oh, I don't have an hour and I'm already running late, but just 10 minutes. And look, all the studies show actually that small amounts of movement like that can be incredibly beneficial. So that's the first thing I do, followed by an absolutely enormous mug of peppermint tea, which I'm probably addicted to.
There are worse addictions than that. And I agree, everybody can find 10 minutes. So I love these little life hacks that people have that just get you going and set up. I feel for your story, it's best to maybe start at the beginning. And you're calling to become a highly accomplished nutritional therapist. Can you tell us a little bit why and also how it all started for you? And what was the moment in your life perhaps that you realised that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, interesting. It's a bit of a light bulb moment, really, because this is my second career. I had a big corporate job that I gave up in 2006 and then went back to school for 4 years and then, of course, graduated as a nutritional therapist. So my original degree was French, and I lived in France for a long time. And although I didn't realise it at the time, I do think that looking back, I learned there was a lot of sort of influence around food, just living with people, working with people, eating at their houses, being invited, not sort of the fancy stuff you see on MasterChef, but I mean just really good home cooking where fresh ingredients were really important, and the quality of a tomato in a simple tomato salad or some grated carrots. I couldn't believe how simple things could be so delicious. And then sort of fast forward 15 years later, and I'm back in London working at a big corporate job. I was starting to get a bit restless. And I remember going on a spa holiday in Morocco. It was fabulous. And it was entirely designed around health and well-being. So you arrived and you had your own program, and the company would fly out their own nutritionists and yoga teachers and masseuse and so on, and their chef. And I hadn't actually read the small print. I knew it was alcohol and caffeine free, but I didn't realize it was going to be wheat and dairy free. And I actually didn't notice till about the Wednesday when someone happened to mention it, because the food had been so amazing. I hadn't sort of been looking for anything else. And at the end of that week, I felt like a completely different woman. I felt so energized, so well. And I hadn't been ill, but I had been very busy and overloaded with work. And it just really showed me in a very short space of time what a difference it can make when you really focus on your diet and having good whole foods. So this next year I did the same one. And then very soon after that, I was looking at their website, and all the nutritionists had the same qualification. And I Googled it, and it was at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition in Richmond. And it was one of those moments in life where I read the course description and I thought, that is what I'm going to do next. And so that was about April. By June, I'd spoken to my boss, I'd handed in my notice. In October, I was walking into my first chemistry class because I had to do a year's foundation first in chemistry, biology, and anatomy and physiology to get me up to first year degree level. And and the rest is history.
What an incredible life change. And I love that it was such an inspirational moment for you. I do think the French do food very well, though, don't they? They do simple food very well and look at their natural ingredients.
I remember when I first moved back, which was in spring of 2000, and just being really shocked by the supermarkets, which had aisles and aisles of ready meals. And it was just something you wouldn't see in France. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with the occasional ready meal if people are really pushed for time. But I just couldn't believe that they had become such a big part, processed food had become such a big part of our culture. And coming from a culture where real whole foods were so important, it was really striking.
And I think we're all waking up to that much more now. You were probably ahead of the game, but we're all getting more aware of the benefits of whole foods now. Can you tell us a bit more about the clinic and where you're based and how you operate, please?
Well, I'm based in West London, in Notting Hill, but my clinic is now entirely virtual. I did used to do a hybrid of some virtual and some in person, but since COVID, actually, it's everybody's become so much more familiar with Zoom. It's made life not only easier for them because we can fit around their busy schedule and not my clinic hours, but also it means that I can have a much broader reach and spread the word about menopause nutrition, which I'm just thrilled about.
And you've written a number of books on the subject as well. And your podcast is called The Happy Menopause, which I love the name of that as well. I'm quite annoyed that you got that first because that's obviously a very great name for a menopause podcast. And you've had some incredible guests on there recently. I was reading about, I think you spoke with David Robson, and he's the author of the Expectation Effect. And I'm interested to hear what you learned from him about nutrition because that was something new for me.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's a fascinating book, and it's really all about the way that our expectations can absolutely determine our health and well-being in a number of ways. One of the things he talks about in there is this fascinating study, which is quite well known, and it's the milkshake study. And it's all about expectations. So in the trial, one group were given a thick pink looking milkshake and were told that it was a real sort of health drink and full of health benefits and low calorie. And then the other group were given exactly the same milkshake and told that it was a luxury, creamy, thick, luxurious, gorgeous milkshake. And what was very interesting was the impact that then their expectation of drinking that product gave them. Because we have a hormone, the hunger hormone, which is called ghrelin, which regulates our appetite. And it's designed to rise before a meal and it should fall after a meal as our satiety response kicks in. But if we don't think we've had a great meal or haven't had much of a meal, or we're looking dismally at a bunch of lettuce leaves and thinking, oh, I hate being on a diet, then ghrelin's not going to fall. And what they noticed in these studies, which is just so fascinating, is that the people who expected to be having a healthy but not very nice or nutritious and interesting milkshake, their ghrelin levels stayed high. And so they wanted to have snacks and eat a bit later on. Whereas the people who thought it was a luxury treat and were really enjoying it, actually their ghrelin levels fell, and so they didn't want to snack later on. So really interesting about the sense of really making sure that you enjoy your food, that you imprint the memory of that food. Another study he talks about is the fact that because we don't eat mindfully now, we shove stuff down in front of the computer while we're at work or while we're on our phone or watching TV, and the brain doesn't have time to assimilate. And so again, the satiety response doesn't kick in. And if your brain hasn't imprinted that memory of the food, then a little bit later on, you're going to be thinking, well, I don't really remember eating. what can I have? What snack can I have? And I think that's fascinating because, of course, in the study, they worked with amnesiacs who genuinely had no memory. And had they been left to themselves, they would have taken a third meal as part of that study. It hadn't been taken away from them simply because they just didn't remember and therefore didn't feel full.
It's so incredible because it's not just a physical response to food, it really is truly an emotional response to food as well then.
Yeah, the brain plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, and tell yourself you're eating something delicious and then you'll enjoy it much more.
Yeah, and that's why it comes down again. And it's one of the things when I'm working on weight management with my clients is, slow down, challenge yourself to be the last to finish, because most of us are really quick eaters, and you're shoveling it down. And the digestion actually starts in the mouth. As we chew our food, saliva releases digestive enzymes that breaks down carbohydrate, and that same saliva also activates enzymes that stimulate the satiety response, which tells us when we're full. So if we eat more mindfully, you don't have to chew 32 times or whatever they say on the internet, but don't be swallowing quickly large lumps of unchewed food. Just sort of enjoy the food, process it, look at it, smell it, taste it, savor it. And then that mindful eating is actually going to help with the weight management in a way that's far more effective than just looking at a bunch of lettuce leaves and not feeling very inspired.
Looking now at menopause particularly, you have a lot of women in your clinic that are perimenopausal and menopause. And what symptoms or difficulties do they tend to come in to talk to you about?
Well, it varies because, as you know, the menopause is not a one size fits all, and no two women really have the same experience. I would say that although women do occasionally consult me because they've got issues around hot flushes and sweats, I'd say it's far more common for them to come to me with problems around anxiety, mood swings, loss of confidence, energy, lack of energy and fatigue is a big one. And also quite a lot of them are experiencing digestive issues around sort of bloating, wind, inconsistent bowel movements. So the symptoms can be many and varied, but I'd say that in terms of symptoms, those are the ones we'd look at. Although, of course, a lot of them are also concerned about their weight. I wouldn't call that a symptom as such, but often they'll present because they're looking for a bit of support there as well.
And what tips do you tend to give women? I know it's very personalized, but just for our listeners to get an idea of the kind of things that you may be suggesting to women at this life stage.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to get back to basics and really just start looking at what are you eating. Think about food for the nutrition it contains, all those fabulous nutrients, rather than focusing on calories. Because if it was just about calories, then you could have a Mars bar for every meal and not eat anything else and still remain within a certain amount. And that's not the point.
You wouldn't look very great after that, would you?
No, not so good. Yeah, um, women who've had children will remember probably when they were pregnant that they thought very carefully about what they ate because they were thinking about what am I giving to the baby. And I think we need to put ourselves in that mindset. What are we giving to ourselves? What's in this food? And I think the first thing to do is really get the balance of the macronutrients right, because women of my generation, we were sort of brought up to demonize fat. And so the low fat diet was the big thing. Nowadays, it's much more fashionable to demonize carbs. But we need all three. They do different jobs in the body. And it's really important to recognize that. Often I'll be suggesting to women that they would benefit from having some nuts and seeds or avocado. And they worry and they say, well, but aren't they fattening? And if fat wasn't called fat, we wouldn't all get so confused. Dietary fat is not the same thing as adipose tissue, which is the formal name for the fat on our bodies. It's the body uses fat to do other things long before it converts it to adipose tissue. And one of those really important things it does with fat, saturated fat in particular, is use it to make sex hormones. And if ever there was a time in our life when we needed to address the balance of sex hormones, menopause is it. So a very low fat diet is not sensible. Carbohydrates, yes, excessive levels of carbohydrate, the body will convert quite quickly to fat stores, but we also need it for energy. And busy midlife women shouldn't be ruling out carbs and whole grains. They should be thinking about the energy that can give them, Get the portions right for sure, because you don't want to be overdoing it. But if you get your digestion right, then you're absorbing all the key nutrients you're having from all the food you're getting. It's important to make sure you're not constipated, because that's an indicator that your metabolism's slowing down, which of course could in turn lead to weight gain. And the lovely fibrous foods are going to help with issues like hormone balance and regulating cholesterol levels, which are both big concerns for women in midlife.
And you're running a masterclass, I think, on how to feel more energetic through nutrition. I was interested to read about that. What can you give us a sort of synopsis of what you talk about for energy?
It's back to my basics again, really. I mean, I didn't mention protein, which is funny because normally the first thing I say to the women in my clinic is eat more protein. Women don't eat enough protein. We need it for our muscle strength, because you can lose up to 40% by the time you've transitioned through the menopause. We need it because our bones are made of protein. Our skin, our hair, and our nails, which all become more vulnerable, we need protein because they're made of protein. And the body will prioritize our vital organs if you're not eating enough protein, and send it to our heart, our lungs, our liver, for example. It's not going to worry about the state of your skin, hair, and nails. So making sure you're getting protein with every meal and snack is really important. The amino acids found in protein-rich foods actually are used by the body to create key neurotransmitters that regulate things like mood and memory and motivation, concentration, all these things that can be issues for women in midlife. So I'd say my triangle of get the balance of those three right is the core of the advice I'd give in clinic. And then in answer to your question about energy, the first thing I'd look at is blood sugar balance, because so many of us have these highs and lows of energy. And very often women say to me, well, I'm all right, a bit tired in the morning, but once I get going, I'm okay. And then lo and behold, there's a crash. The crash is nearly always about blood sugar, and very often the crash is mid-afternoon. That dreaded 3 p.m. one where you just think, oh, I've just had it. So getting your blood sugar balance is the first thing you need to do, and that's Nutrition 101 for the menopause. It's Nutrition 101 for energy. It's Nutrition 101 for your mood, for so many different body systems, just getting that right. And the way to do it is the combination of protein and fiber with every meal and snack. So fiber is complex carbohydrate. So things like brown bread, brown rice, brown pasta, vegetables are a fantastic source of complex carbohydrate. What else? Fruits with an edible skin, because the fiber tends to hang around the skin. That's what I'd be looking at. And then, because protein is hard to digest, it slows down the release of the carbohydrate in the body even further, really keeps you going for longer. So the magic combination of protein and fiber with every meal and snack will keep you going for longer. It'll regulate those cravings so you don't have issues around weight management. It'll give you a nice steady supply of energy throughout the day. Because if you go to bed with your blood sugar high, instead of staying in the nice narrow band that it's programmed to stay in, then your insulin will spike, the blood sugar will then start to crash, and about 3 a.m. you'll be wide awake, not sure why. It wasn't a hot flush this time. What's going on? Probably your blood sugar saying, wake up, sort it out. And that's because when your blood sugar crashes, your stress hormones are released. And once your stress hormones are interfering with your sleep, you're going to feel tired all the time anyway. So getting the blood sugar right is really good for the highs and lows that you might get in the day, but also really good to support optimal sleep. And we all know that we're much better. We feel all around better, and we're far nicer to be around when we've had a good night's sleep.
Anything for a good night's sleep. What about, do you look at exercise in your clinic as well, or do you focus only on nutrition, or do you talk about the whole approach to menopause?
Well, I do talk about the whole approach to menopause. I mean, obviously, I'm not a fitness specialist, and it's important to recognise where your scope of practice starts and ends. But there are certain obvious things. If I notice that someone isn't exercising, then I will definitely recommend it. And I'll recommend different types of exercise. And I might refer them on to a personal trainer or a specialist coach if I feel that they would benefit from that. Because you see, one of the things I observe, and I'm a bit guilty of it at times as well, is that in midlife, we tend to move to the mat. There's a lot of Pilates and yoga going on, which is great in so many levels, really good for your core, really good for your flexibility and your strength and all of that. But we need cardiovascular work. because one of the things that's a real consideration as we move into menopause is that our risk of coronary heart disease becomes much greater. Up to menopause, it's men who have a much greater risk of it than we do. But post-menopause, we have the same risk. So that's no good. We need to be thinking about, well, how are we working the muscle that is our heart? And are we getting a lot of cardiovascular work that's sort of making that heart beat? So are we running? Are we dancing? Are we doing fast swimming or something that makes us breathe much more heavily? Are we doing strength exercises that will really put pressure on our bones and encourage them to renew the bone tissue so that we don't end up with the potential issue of low bone density, which again is something that can be a problem post-menopause. So working with weights, doing impact work or impact exercise like running or racket sports or something like that where you're putting pressure on your bones. So really encouraging them to mix it up. And where I think they might require specialist advice, encourage them to do that. But one of the things that has become a big concern, I think, is that people lost a lot of just regular movement through lockdown, because even if they weren't people who exercise regularly, they might walk to the station. They'd perhaps get on the bus and walk to the bus stop or up and down the stairs in the tube station if they're in London, and walking around the office, up and down the stairs in the office, going out for lunch to get something and come back. And their steps would mount up over that course, even if it wasn't formal exercise. But all of a sudden, it's great to work from home, especially on a day like today where it happens to be snowing heavily and it's very cold. But mostly it means we don't move as much, and if you're in a small house or even a small flat, then you'd move even less. So just people in those situations, really encouraging them to take the time to get out, because not only will it build strength, but also just getting fresh air and exercise is really, really good for your mental health.
Just going to say that it helps your mental health as well. And I think we talk about trying to move at least once every hour. And it doesn't need to be a lot, but as long as you get up to make your cup of tea or you just move around the house a little bit, it makes such a difference mentally and physically, I think, getting those few extra steps in. Now, it wouldn't be a menopause podcast if we didn't talk about HRT. I'm keen to hear your views on what you think and what part that plays in the advice that you give.
Well, I am not a medical professional, so it plays no part directly because that would be beyond my scope of practice. But that's not to say that I don't refer women back to their doctor if I think that actually they should look into this. I feel really strongly that women don't have enough information full stop about the menopause, whether it's about the diet and lifestyle angle, whether it's understanding HRT and the benefits or the potential risks depending on your own personal medical history, and knowing what's right for you. So I think the first thing you should do if you're perimenopausal is get that advice. Go and speak to your doctor. And if you're not happy with what the advice you get from your doctor, go and see a different doctor, because doctors are really busy, and in a 10-minute session you might not get the person who's got such an interest in female health as perhaps another doctor might have. Understand the massive role that diet and lifestyle can play in regulating your symptoms. Worth remembering that probably about 20% of women have a really tough time during the menopause, and they get sort of most of the symptoms and pretty severe ones. And I would think anyone struggling in there should consider very hard HRT. There's nothing wrong with menopausal hormonal treatment. It's not sort of giving up, even if you think, oh, I didn't fancy doing it. Sometimes it's the right thing for you. Different women have different requirements. We're all biochemically individual. So I think definitely those women should really be looking at it seriously. I think then there's another 20% who wonder, what we're all banging on about all the time, because they're sailing through it and they don't have any problems. And then in the middle, there's about 60% of us, about most of us, who have some but not all symptoms with greater or lesser degree of severity. And I think that's where diet and lifestyle can play a huge role. But what's important to understand is that regardless, it's going to play a big role, because hormone replacement therapy is ultimately just the hormone. Your body still needs to know what to do with it. And for that to happen, you need all the cofactors, which are the catalyst nutrients that will create the enzymatic reactions in the body. That means that the estrogen you're getting is actually able to do its job. So you can't just think, oh, I'll have HRT and not worry about my diet. You still need to get the diet right, because your HRT will work much, much better. So really important, I think, to know what the options are and make an informed decision for you, because what's right for your best friend might not be right for you, and vice versa. And I'd also give a shout out, and this is something I recommend a lot actually, is vaginal estrogen, which is very different. Topical vaginal estrogen. Recently, the fabulous Dr. Claire McCauley told me that she's a breast cancer oncologist, that the dosage of a whole year of vaginal estrogen is the equivalent of taking one HRT pill. So it's an incredibly low dose. It's not systemic. So if you think, oh, I don't really want to take HRT because I have my reasons, well, then that's fine. But that's not to say you wouldn't necessarily benefit from getting that vaginal estrogen, dealing with any of the issues around some of the dryness that you can get, because it can also lead to an imbalance of the acid alkaline status of the vagina, which in turn can then lead to issues around thrush and or urinary tract infections. So things that, really worth considering. And again, I'll be sending women back to their GP to be talking about that.
That's really interesting about the dosage for the vaginal estrogen. I didn't know it was that low. That's incredible, and it's still working and it's still effective for women. That's something really for women to think about and to take home today. Thank you for that. Now you've written 3 books, incredible books: The Happy Menopause, Smart Nutrition to Help You Flourish, available on Amazon. And do you want to talk us through your other 2 books as well?
Well, my first book was The Right Bite, and it's smart food choices for eating on the go, because at the time I was doing a lot of clinical work with people who were busy office workers, and they were saying to me, oh, well, what am I supposed to eat at pret-a-manger? What sandwich can I have? What's the best, or what's the least worst? So The Right Bite is the least worst, or hopefully the best of everything. And then the second book is Va-Va-Voom, the 10-day energy diet. Because again, I was just getting so many people coming to my clinic and saying, I'm just tired all the time. And it must be my age. I remember a 29-year-old said to me, oh, it must be my age. And I had to struggle not to laugh out loud. But there is a sense of that. People say that to me when they're 39 and 49 and 59. And really, you shouldn't probably be saying it until you're about 89. Because assuming you've ruled out any medical conditions, the chances are that diet and lifestyle are going to be the problem. And if you deal with those, then you can have as much energy as you had when you were younger. You can really do a lot with food. And then the Happy Menopause, well, that's my pride and joy, really, because it's a symptom by symptom guide to the best way that nutrition can help to manage your menopause. And I called it the Happy Menopause because I just feel strongly that we should be celebrating this time of life. Women are magnificent beings. We're extraordinary. And we've come through this whole change, and it should be an opening of a door, not the closing of something. There's a whole new you, a whole new set of possibilities. We're strong, we're wise, we've got so much to offer the world. And so I just didn't want it to be this doom and gloom that you often get around the menopause.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And what about the next 10 years? I mean, we're talking a lot about menopause now. It's become something that we can talk about much more freely because of some of the celebrities have sort of got on the bandwagon of it, which is super. Where do you see the development of supporting women in the next 10 years? Do you think it's more of the same, or do you think things will change?
I think in terms of the next 10 years, it's going to be perhaps, certainly what I would wish is a much greater balance, a real understanding about the role that hormone replacement therapy can have, and who it's right for and why you should take it. But also a much greater understanding of the role of diet and lifestyle, which may work alongside HRT, may work entirely independently of HRT if you don't want to or can't take it. I think at the moment, those women who can't take it for reasons of perhaps, breast cancer, etc., if they've been instructed not to take it because of their current situation, need to understand there are still lots of things they can do. And I think we also need to see it rolled out to communities a lot more, because it's great that the celebrities are talking about it, but at the moment it is still quite a sort of, white middle class condition, as it were. And I think you scratch the surface and there are lots of communities out there who just aren't talking about it, aren't aware of it, women who are struggling with it. So I think we need, over the next 10 years, we'll see that filtering down, so it becomes, I think, much better known and much better understood, which can only be a good thing.
Absolutely. And what if you were to give our listeners one tip, if you can distill it down to one tip on how to deal with their perimenopause symptoms? What would it be, a top tip?
It'll be a broad one. It's going to be kind to yourself, because we're usually very busy looking after everyone else except ourselves and putting everyone else first. But this is the time to put yourself first. So I think, be kind to yourself, because underneath that, that's a big umbrella. Underneath that, it means eating right. It means taking the time for yourself. It means looking at your sleep hygiene. It means looking at your exercise. And all of that is self-care. So my tip is, be kind to yourself.
Absolutely lovely and perfect, Jackie. Thanks so much. Well, I've really loved chatting to you today, and I've learned so much. So I hope our listeners have as well. What are the best places for people to find you online?
Oh, very easy. On all social media, I am at well UK, or you can look at my website, well-well-well.co.uk. From there, you can find me easily.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jackie. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been great chatting to you. Fabulous questions. Thanks very much for having me.